whole does not make sense. And being that there is lack of confidence in the local authorities, who have already, in my judgment, seemed to have mishandled where it was going.
Imagine standing on a sliver of sand with nothing behind you but scrub pine and marsh grass. Nothing ahead but the Gulf of Mexico stretching to the horizon. And no way to call anyone. Not a text, not a call, not a single bar of signal. Because you are 10 miles from the nearest cell tower, and the boat you arrived on just became a white speck and disappeared. That is Horn Island, Mississippi, on the 4th of July. It's a barrier island in the Gulf Islands National Seashore, a place where the National Park Service deliberately keeps things raw. No roads, no buildings, no rangers living on site, no infrastructure of any kind. On a holiday weekend, the beach is a floating carnival of anchored boats, coolers dragged onto the sand, music thumping from portable speakers, kids splashing in the shallows, bonfire pits dug by the last group that camped overnight. It is, simultaneously, one of the most crowded and most isolated places you can be on the Mississippi coast. On the afternoon of July 4th, 2026, 18-year-old Nolan Xavier Wells was standing on that beach with a group of friends. He had his phone, he had the sun on his shoulders. He was, by every account we have, exactly where he wanted to be. A local kid, a football player, a quiet leader, spending a holiday the way thousands of Gulf Coast teenagers spend it every summer. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, his friends were back on the boat, heading north toward the mainland. Nolan was not with them. 2 days later, on July 6th, a National Park Service ranger patrolling the waters around Horn Island spotted something that stopped his boat. A body, floating in the shallows. The clothing, the build, the age, everything matched the description of the missing teenager. The Jackson County coroner, Bruce Lind, would later confirm what Nolan's family already knew in their bones. Dental records and DNA proved it was him. From that moment, what might have been recorded as a tragic accidental drowning, a heartbreaking but statistically unremarkable death during a holiday weekend on the water, became something else entirely. Because Nolan's parents, Christine and Elmore Wonsley, did not accept the story they were being told. They said their son would never have willingly stayed behind on a remote island alone. They said his phone came back with data missing. They said the friends who were with him that day cannot agree on what Nolan said before they left. And they said publicly, repeatedly, that nobody, not the friends, not the investigators, has given them a straight answer about how their son, a black teenager on a boat trip with a group of white friends, ended up dead in the water while everyone else made it home. This is Crime Autopsy. This is the case of Nolan Xavier Wells. Welcome back to Crime Autopsy. If you're new here, let me tell you exactly how we operate, because it matters, especially with a case like this one. We take real, ongoing investigations and we lay them out methodically. What's been confirmed by official sources, what's been alleged by the family and their legal team, what's in dispute, and what remains completely unknown. We do not fill the gaps with speculation. We do not name private citizens who have not been charged with a crime. We do not pretend to have answers that the evidence doesn't yet support. What we do is give you the clearest possible picture of a case that the entire country is now watching, so that you can draw your own informed conclusions, and so that when new information drops, you understand exactly what it means. Right now, in the summer of 2026, this is one of the most actively discussed unresolved cases in the United States. It has drawn statements from civil rights leaders, financial backing from a former NFL quarterback, a press conference in Harlem, national morning show interviews, and a torrent of online commentary that has, in some corners, far outpaced the known facts. If you want cases like this broken down the moment new details emerge, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because this one is moving fast, and I will be back with an update the minute that official autopsy report lands. And I want your attention on this one specifically, not just as a viewer but as a participant. By the time you reach the end of this video, I think you're going to have exactly the same questions the family has, and I want to know how you're processing them. Drop your take in the comments respectfully, because there is a grieving mother and father who, whether they read the comments or not, deserve to have their son's memory treated with dignity. Let's get into it. Before the hashtags, before Ben Crump stood behind a microphone, before Colin Kaepernick's name entered the story, Nolan Wells was just an 18-year-old kid from the Mississippi Gulf Coast trying to figure out his next move. And if you talk to the people who knew him, the first thing they'll tell you isn't about how he died. It's about how he carried himself when he was alive. His father, Elmore Wansley, described him in words that come up again and again from coaches, teammates, and family friends. Not a big talker, a presence. The kind of young man who walks into a room and doesn't need to be the loudest voice to be the one everyone looks to. On the football field, that quiet leadership translated into something his coaches recognized immediately. The player who would pull a younger teammate aside and walk him through a drill without being asked. The one who set the tone in the weight room not by yelling but by never missing a rep. Nolan was a running back set to return to Southwest Mississippi Community College in August to begin preparing for the upcoming season. He was due to turn 19 the following month. His mother, Christine Wansley, has spoken about him in terms that go beyond the usual parental pride. She called him a special soul, someone who was placed on this earth, as she put it, to cheer other people up, to lift them up, even when the moment wasn't about him. That's not just a grieving mother finding kind words. It's a specific, repeated characterization that matches what friends and extended family have echoed in the days since his death. Nolan was a steady force. He was the one who made sure everyone else was okay. On the morning of July 4th, 2026, nothing about the plan would have raised an eyebrow. A boat trip to Horn Island with a group of friends, several of them white, a detail that would later become central to the public narrative, is the kind of thing that happens 100 times every summer weekend along that stretch of coast. You load a cooler, you gas up the boat, you point the bow south, and 45 minutes later you're anchoring in sandbars off an island that feels a world away from the mainland. It's a rite of passage. It's normal. It's safe, mostly, as long as everyone sticks together. By the end of that day, normal had dissolved into something unrecognizable, and Nolan Wells had become the center of a national story. To understand why this case is so maddeningly difficult to piece together, why, weeks later, we still don't have a clean sequence of events, you have to understand Horn Island itself. Not as a dot on a map, but as an environment, a set of conditions that make certainty nearly impossible. Horn Island is one of the barrier islands that form the Gulf Islands National Seashore, a protected chain stretching from Mississippi to Florida. It sits roughly 10 miles south of Pascagoula, a straight shot across Mississippi Sound. There is no bridge, no ferry service, no regularly scheduled transportation of any kind. You get there by private boat, or you don't get there at all. The National Park Service manages the island, but they do not maintain a permanent staff presence there. Park rangers patrol the waters periodically, but day to day, hour to hour, the island is unsupervised. There are no buildings, no visitor center, no restrooms, no shelter of any kind beyond what you bring yourself. No cell towers, no Wi-Fi, no cameras mounted on poles recording the comings and goings of every boat. Once you step onto that sand, you are, for all practical purposes, invisible to the digital infrastructure that documents every other moment of our lives. On a holiday weekend like the 4th of July, that isolation doesn't translate to solitude. Quite the opposite. Horn Island becomes a floating party. Dozens of boats anchored in the shallows, groups spread out along the shoreline, music blending into a wash of sound, bonfires sparking up as the sun goes down. It's crowded, chaotic, and entirely undocumented by any official source. No one is taking attendance. No one is keeping a log of which boat arrived when, who got off, who got back on. If something happens, an argument, a confrontation, a medical emergency, a person slipping beneath the water, there is no lifeguard to blow a whistle, no ranger on duty to radio for help, no security footage to review afterward. The only record of events is the memory of whoever was there, and memory, especially memory formed in a chaotic, loud, emotionally charged environment, is famously unreliable. This is the environment Nolan Wells was in when, According to the timeline investigators have pieced together, he was last seen alive on the beach around 3 p.m. on July 4th. And this is the environment in which, according to the account that law enforcement initially relayed to his family, he made a decision that his parents refused to believe, that he chose not to get back on the boat when the rest of his group departed. The boat left. His friends made it back to the mainland. Nolan didn't. The hours between the moment Nolan's friends returned without him and the moment his family realized something was terribly wrong are not fully documented in the public record. But what we do know starts with the frantic calls that began when Nolan didn't show up where he was supposed to be. By the time the alarm was raised, the sun had set. The holiday celebrations on the mainland were in full swing, and a teenager who never missed a check-in was unaccounted for on an island with no way to reach him. What followed was one of the larger multi-agency search operations the Mississippi Gulf Coast has mounted in recent memory. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department took the lead, coordinating with the U.S. Coast Guard, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, and the Gulf Islands National Seashore Authority. Boats crisscrossed the waters around Horn Island. Helicopters scanned the shoreline from above. Dive teams prepared for the worst. And alongside the official assets came the United Cajun Navy, the volunteer search and rescue organization that has become a familiar presence at disasters across the Gulf South, from hurricane flooding to missing persons cases. They brought their own boats, their own local knowledge, their own grim experience with what the water can do. For 2 days, Christine and Elmore Wonsley waited on the mainland, fielding calls, posting pleas on social media, clinging to the hope that their son had somehow made it to another stretch of shore, another boat, another island. Friends and family gathered. A GoFundMe, started by a family friend and later taken over by Christine herself, began circulating. Originally to fund the search effort, then to cover funeral expenses that no parent should have to think about while the search is still active. Within 24 hours, it had raised over $14,000. The number kept climbing. On Monday, July 6th, the waiting ended. A National Park Service ranger on routine patrol near Horn Island found a body in the water. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind was direct with the media. The body matched the description of the missing teenager, and while they would wait for DNA confirmation, there was no reason to believe it was anyone else. Dental records and DNA testing would later confirm what the family had already begun to grieve. Christine Wonsley posted the news herself, in words that have since been shared thousands of times. She wrote that she, Nolan's father, and their entire circle were absolutely devastated, that her heart was broken for her sweet son, the one who was always willing to cheer for others, always willing to lift others up. She wrote that Nolan was a special soul, and that God took his time creating him. The post was raw, immediate, and utterly bereft. The GoFundMe continued to draw support, eventually attracting donations from public figures across the country. Most notably, former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick contributed to fund something that would become a central piece of this story, an independent autopsy. But we'll get to that. This is the moment the case shifts. This is where a tragic drowning, a terrible but uncomplicated accident, becomes something the entire country is now arguing about. Because from the very first time they heard the official account, Nolan's parents did not believe it. The version of events they were given in the early hours of the investigation was straightforward. Nolan chose to stay behind on Horn Island when his friends left. He made a decision, on his own, to remain on a remote barrier island with no cell service, no shelter, and no guaranteed ride back, while the rest of the group boarded the boat and headed for the mainland. That is the story the friends reportedly told. That is the story law enforcement initially relayed to the family. Elmore Wonsley, Nolan's father, has rejected that story in the most direct terms possible, and he has done so on national television, multiple times. Speaking to CBS Mornings in an interview that has been clipped and shared across every platform covering this case, Elmore said plainly that Nolan wouldn't have done that. That Nolan always stayed with the group. That his son lived by a rule. If you're with me, you come back with me. He described it as an unspoken code, The kind of principle that doesn't need to be announced because everyone who spends time with Nolan understands it instinctively. Then Elmore said something that cut through the noise. He said that if he had been on that trip, if he had been a parent chaperone, he would have told Nolan to get back on that boat. Not because he was being overprotective, but because he wouldn't want to have to answer to Nolan's parents if something happened to their son on that island. Think about the weight of that statement. A father, imagining himself in the position of the people who left his child behind, saying he would never have allowed it because he would have known what the consequences could be, and he would have known what he owed to the parents who entrusted their son to that trip. When a reporter asked him directly, "Do you believe Nolan was left behind rather than choosing to stay?" His answer was one word, delivered without hesitation. Yes. He went on to say, with the kind of clarity that only grief can sharpen, that he doesn't believe his son decided to stay on that island by himself. That's not his character, he said. That's not his character. This is the emotional core of the entire case. It is not just grief, though the grief is immense and visible in every interview the Wonsleys have given. It is a father and a mother looking at the official account of their son's final hours and saying, with everything they know about the child they raised, "I do not believe this. Something else happened. And we are going to find out what it was." If the father's gut-level certainty is the emotional engine of this case, the contradictions in the friends' accounts are the factual engine, the thing that has elevated this from a family's private anguish to a matter of national scrutiny. Family attorney Ben Crump, who needs no introduction to anyone who follows civil rights cases in America, has been explicit about what he calls glaring contradictions in the stories told by the friends who were on that boat trip, and he has laid those contradictions out in public, repeatedly, in terms that leave little room for misinterpretation. According to Crump, the friends who left Horn Island that afternoon have said that Nolan told a young woman on the beach that he was going to get back on the boat with them. That was his stated intention, in their version of events. He was leaving. He was getting on the boat. He was not planning to stay. But according to Crump, that same young woman has told a different story. Her account, as Crump has characterized it, is that Nolan told her he was staying behind with her, that he was not getting back on the boat. These are two fundamentally incompatible statements about the last real decision Nolan Wells is known to have communicated to another human being. Was he leaving, or was he staying? The friends say one thing. The young woman, by Crump's account, says another. Somebody's memory is wrong, or somebody is not telling the truth. Now, and I want to be very deliberate about this, because this is the part where true crime content can slide into territory that does real harm. We do not know which version is accurate. We do not know whether there is an innocent explanation for the discrepancy. Human memory is notoriously plastic, especially in chaotic, high-stimulus environments like a crowded beach party. It is entirely possible that two people heard the same conversation and walked away with genuinely different understandings of what was said. That happens. It happens all the time. The question is whether that's what happened here, or whether the contradiction points to something being actively concealed. What we do know is that these are the two accounts currently in tension with each other, as characterized by the family's own attorney, and that this contradiction is a major reason why Ben Crump and the Wonsley family are demanding a full, transparent investigation. We also know that the Jackson County Sheriff's Department has stated that the friends are cooperating with the investigation. That's an important data point. Whatever else is happening, the people who were on that boat have not, at least as of the most recent public statements, refused to engage with detectives. Cooperation does not equal honesty, and it doesn't equal consistency. But it does mean the door to questioning remains open. Then there is the video. And in a case built largely on conflicting verbal accounts and missing data, a video, even a short, grainy, context-free clip, lands like a thunderclap. Ben Crump has referenced footage that reportedly shows Nolan Wells on Horn Island during the trip, in an agitated state. In the clip, according to Crump's characterization, Nolan can be heard saying something to the effect of, "Give me my phone." "What are you doing?" The words are directed at someone off camera. The exchange appears heated. It is not a casual, "Hey, toss me my phone." It sounds, from the descriptions we have, like a confrontation. We do not have the full context of this video publicly. We don't know who Nolan was talking to. We don't know what led up to that moment, whether it was playful roughhousing that escalated, a genuine dispute, or something else entirely. We don't know what happened immediately after the clip ends. Those are all critical, unanswered questions. What we do know is that Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter has publicly confirmed that his department is aware of the video and that it is under active review as part of the investigation. That means this isn't internet rumor. It's a piece of evidence that law enforcement has acknowledged receiving and is analyzing. On its own, a clip of a teenager arguing about his phone at a beach party is not evidence of a crime. Teenagers argue. Phones get grabbed as a joke, or out of annoyance, or during a dispute that blows over in 60 seconds. The presence of an argument on video does not by itself mean that argument is connected to a death that occurred sometime later. But in the context of everything else, the disputed final words, the missing data, the isolated location, the fact that Nolan ended up dead while everyone else went home, that video becomes one more piece of a puzzle that investigators and the public are desperately trying to assemble. Separately, authorities have indicated they are looking into online reports of some kind of altercation on Horn Island on July 4th, and specifically whether Nolan Wells was involved in it. Again, this is unconfirmed, under active investigation, and has not been definitively tied to his death. But the fact that detectives are even asking the question tells you that they too are not treating this as an open and shut accidental drowning. If you have followed this case at all, if you've seen the headlines, the social media posts, the comment sections, you know that no single detail has driven more public suspicion than what happened to Nolan's phone. It is the piece of evidence that has, more than anything else, convinced a large segment of the public that something is being hidden. Here's what we know from the family's account. After Nolan's disappearance, the family was able to locate his phone using location tracking, the kind of Find My feature that most of us have enabled without thinking about it. They recovered the device, and once they had it in their hands, they say what they found did not add up. According to reporting on the family's claims, the phone's internal history conflicts with data from Nolan's Snapchat account. More strikingly, his social media accounts reportedly contained no photos or videos at all from the day of the boat trip. Not a single saved image, not a single video clip. For a young man his parents describe as someone who posted frequently, who documented his life the way most 18-year-olds document their lives. An entire holiday outing with friends producing zero saved content is, at minimum, highly unusual. Christine Wansley herself has offered one plausible, technically accurate explanation. Snapchat messages are designed to auto-delete. That's the whole point of the platform. Content disappears after a set period unless someone actively saves it. And her son, she has said, posted constantly, meaning that a lot of what he shared that day may simply have vanished according to the app's default behavior. That is a real feature. It's how Snapchat works. It doesn't require anyone to manually delete anything. But that explanation has not fully settled the family's concerns, and it hasn't settled the public's either. Because the missing content isn't just Snapchat stories. It's the phone's broader photo roll, its message history, the kind of digital exhaust that even auto-deleting apps can't fully erase if the underlying device still holds cached data. The family has said through Ben Crump that what they found, or rather, what they didn't find, simply doesn't line up with the son they knew. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department has now formally requested the phone so that their own forensic experts can perform an independent extraction. This is the standard next step in any investigation involving digital evidence. Take the device out of the hands of the family and the public, put it in a controlled lab environment, and use tools that can recover deleted files, establish timelines, and verify whether data was removed manually or disappeared through normal app behavior. Until that forensic analysis is complete, we are all, family, public, media, operating on incomplete information. There is a detail in this case that tells you, more clearly than any interview soundbite, just how little trust has been established between Nolan's family and the local investigative process. They did not wait for the state medical examiner to release an official cause of death. They did not accept, on faith, that the autopsy conducted through normal Mississippi channels would give them the full truth. They commissioned their own. An independent autopsy, A second, entirely separate medical examination conducted by a pathologist chosen by the family, not by the state, is not unheard of in high-profile cases, but it is always significant. It signals that the family does not believe the official process, left to its own devices, will produce a result they can trust. And in this case, the independent autopsy was partially funded by Colin Kaepernick, the former NFL quarterback, whose name has become synonymous with athlete activism around racial justice and police accountability. That name, attached to this case, immediately tells you that this has traveled far beyond Jackson County, Mississippi. Ben Crump and the Wansley family have framed the independent autopsy explicitly as a transparency measure. Their logic is straightforward. If there is a second set of medical findings, produced by an expert with no ties to local law enforcement, no history with the Jackson County Sheriff's Department, no relationship with the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office, then whatever that second autopsy concludes cannot be dismissed as compromised. It stands apart. It provides a check on the official narrative. As of the most recent reporting, the State Medical Examiner's official autopsy report remains pending. No cause of death has been officially confirmed. Authorities have said, repeatedly, that drowning is suspected, which, given the circumstances, is the most straightforward explanation for a body recovered in the water off a remote island 2 days after someone went missing from the beach. Geographically, circumstantially, drowning makes sense. But suspected is not a conclusion. It is a placeholder. And until an official cause of death is released, and until the independent autopsy findings are made public alongside it, every possibility remains technically on the table. Accidental drowning. A medical event that preceded submersion. A physical altercation that left Nolan incapacitated before he entered the water. Something else entirely that no one has yet publicly suggested. The only thing we can say with certainty is that the official word is not yet in, and the family has taken extraordinary steps to make sure that when it does come, there will be a second opinion waiting. In a case with this much public emotion, it is essential to separate what the authorities have actually said, on the record, from what people on the internet are saying they've said. So let's lay out, clearly, the public posture of the Jackson County Sheriff's Department under Sheriff John Ledbetter. Sheriff Ledbetter has stated, in direct comments to media, that the friends who were with Nolan on Horn Island are cooperating with the investigation. That is a specific, verifiable claim, and it has been repeated in multiple outlets. He has also stated that his department welcomes the family's independent efforts, including the private autopsy, a statement that, whatever you make of its sincerity, is notably not hostile to outside scrutiny. He has confirmed that investigators are actively reviewing the disputed video. He has confirmed that the department has requested Nolan's phone for independent forensic extraction. And he has said publicly that investigators are awaiting the state medical examiner's official report before drawing any conclusions about cause of death. This is not the posture of a department that has closed this case. It is not the posture of a department that has publicly settled on accidental drowning, no further questions, move along. It is the posture of an active, ongoing investigation, one in which the sheriff himself appears to be leaving every evidentiary door open. Whether that open posture reflects genuine investigative uncertainty, or whether it reflects an awareness that this case is now under a national microscope, is something reasonable people can debate. What is not debatable is that, as of right now, the investigation is not closed. At the same time, several outlets covering this story, including those specifically focused on Black community reaction, have noted an important distinction. Alongside the legitimate, documented contradictions in this case, there is a separate and growing wave of unverified claims and outright misinformation spreading online. Some of it far outpaces anything that has been confirmed by anyone close to the investigation. Rumors about what happened on that island, about who did what, about evidence that doesn't publicly exist. It's all out there, and it's mingling with the real facts in ways that make the truth harder to discern, not easier. This is the distinction I need you, watching this video, to hold on to. There is a real, documented, on-the-record set of contradictions in this case. And there is also a layer of pure internet speculation that has attached itself to the story. Our job, and honestly, your job in the comments, if you choose to weigh in, is to keep those two categories separate. Because if we don't, we become part of the noise, and the signal gets lost. Let's ask the question directly, because it deserves a direct answer. Why has this case, out of the countless drowning investigations that happen every summer along American coastlines, become a story with Al Sharpton and Ben Crump standing together at a podium in Harlem, New York? Why are national morning shows booking the parents? Why is Colin Kaepernick funding a private autopsy? Why is this the case that has broken through? Part of the answer is in the specifics we have already walked through. The disputed final words, the video, the missing phone data. Cases that contain genuine, documented inconsistencies tend to attract scrutiny, and in a media environment where true crime content has an enormous built-in audience, those inconsistencies get amplified fast. There is a real story here, with real unanswered questions, and that alone is enough to draw sustained attention. But there is another part of the answer, and it is the part that Ben Crump and Al Sharpton have placed front and center. A black teenager goes on a boat trip with a group of white friends. That black teenager ends up dead in the water. The white friends come home. The black teenager's family is told a story that they find impossible to believe. The white friends' accounts of the black teenager's last words contradict each other. The black teenager's phone is recovered with data missing. You can see the framework. It is the framework of a long, painful, and well-documented history in this country. A history of cases where black families have had to fight, publicly and exhaustingly, for answers that other families seem to receive as a matter of course. Where black victims were assumed to be responsible for their own deaths until overwhelming evidence proved otherwise. Where local investigations, left to their own momentum, simply stopped. Whether that framework applies to the specific, provable facts of what happened to Nolan Wells on July 4, 2026, is something that only a completed, transparent, and independently verifiable investigation can establish. It is entirely possible that the full truth, once uncovered, will not fit neatly into that framework. It is also possible that it will. The point for Ben Crump and for the Wansley family is that they are not waiting to find out. They are forcing the question in public on purpose because they say the alternative, trusting the process quietly, has failed too many families before them. And then there is the platform itself. A press conference at the National Action Network's headquarters. A sit-down interview on Good Morning America. A segment on CBS Mornings. This family and their legal team have very deliberately kept this case in the national conversation, using every media lever available to them. That is not an accident. It is a strategy. One born of the belief that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and that a case discussed on national television is harder to quietly close than a case that stays local. Let's strip this down to its essentials. Here, cleanly and directly, are the questions that a completed investigation still needs to answer. The questions that, as of this recording, do not have public resolutions. Question 1. Did Nolan Wells choose to stay behind on Horn Island, or was he left behind against his intent? His parents say the idea that he would voluntarily remain alone on a remote island is completely out of character. The friends' own accounts, according to the family's attorney, don't even agree with each other on what Nolan said before they departed. Which version reflects reality, and why do the accounts differ? Question 2. What actually happened in the video where Nolan is heard demanding his phone back? Who was he speaking to? What preceded that exchange? What followed it? And does that confrontation, if it was a confrontation, have any connection to his death? Question 3. What is the real explanation for the missing content on Nolan's phone and social media accounts? Is it routine app behavior, Snapchat auto-deletion, and normal digital housekeeping? Or is it something else? Only a forensic extraction, conducted by independent experts with no stake in the outcome, can answer that question with any certainty. Question 4. Was there an altercation on Horn Island that day involving Nolan, as some online reports have suggested, and as investigators are reportedly examining? If so, who was involved, what was it about, and is it connected in any way to the fact that Nolan ended up dead in the water hours later? Question 5. What will the official cause of death be once the state medical examiner's report and the independent autopsy are both complete? Will drowning hold up as the full and sufficient explanation, or will either autopsy raise findings that complicate or contradict that theory? None of these questions have public answers yet, and I would rather tell you that honestly than manufacture a resolution for the sake of a dramatic finish. The uncertainty is the story right now. The questions are the story. So where does this case stand right now, in the summer of 2026? Here is the factual status, as of the most recent updates available at the time of this recording. No official cause of death has been released by the state medical examiner. No charges have been filed against anyone. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department has formally requested Nolan's phone for independent forensic extraction, and that analysis is either underway or pending. The disputed video is under active review by investigators. The family's independently commissioned autopsy and the state medical examiner's official findings are both either still pending or newly released, depending on exactly when you are watching this. Nolan's family, represented by Ben Crump, continues to press publicly for full transparency from Mississippi authorities, and they show no signs of stepping back from the national stage. This is a live investigation. Cases like this can shift dramatically, and without warning, the moment forensic results come back, the moment an autopsy report is made public, the moment a witness comes forward with information they hadn't previously shared. If you are watching this video weeks or months after its publication, I encourage you to check the description for any updates we've added since this script was recorded. So here is where I land, and here is where I want you to land too. Not with a conclusion, because a conclusion isn't yet possible, but with a clear-eyed recognition of what this case actually is. This is a genuinely unresolved death investigation with real, documented contradictions, not manufactured ones, not internet-fueled ones. A father who says, without blinking, on national television, that his son would never have chosen to stay behind on that island alone. Two friends whose accounts of Nolan's last words reportedly do not match. A video that the sheriff himself has acknowledged reviewing. A phone that the family says came back to them with content that shouldn't be missing. And at the same time, a suspected drowning in treacherous remote water off a barrier island with no lifeguards and no cell service that has not yet been officially confirmed as anything other than a suspected drowning. Both of those realities can coexist. Both are true right now, in the absence of completed forensic findings that might tip the scales one way or the other. The danger, in cases like this, is letting one reality erase the other before the evidence has spoken. The work is to hold both in your mind at the same time, to let the questions sit unresolved for as long as the evidence requires, and to refuse the temptation to fill the silence with certainty that doesn't belong to us. I want to know what you think happened on that beach, not what you're certain of, because none of us can be certain of anything yet, but what your read is, given everything we've laid out. Drop it in the comments and do it respectfully. There is a family on the other side of this screen. Christine and Elmore Wansley are real people, grieving a real son, and some of what gets written about Nolan online is going to find its way back to them. Be the kind of person in the comments that you would want reading about your own child. If you subscribe to one true crime channel this year, make it this one. Because the moment that official autopsy report drops, the moment the forensic phone extraction comes back, the moment the sheriff holds a press conference, we will be here, breaking down exactly what it means, without hype, without speculation, without anything but the facts as they are. This has been Crime Autopsy. The case is Nolan Xavier Wells. We'll see you in the next one.